The battle for the next London mayor is hotting up. Zac Goldsmith is the Conservative candidate for the London mayoral elections. We are here at the Conservative campaign headquarters to have a conversation with Mr. Goldsmith. Why don't you come in and join us? Good afternoon, Zac. Thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you.
The top of your agenda is a housing issue.
Yeah.
Housing is a big deal in London, as we all know. Now, you plan on building 50,000 homes in a year. The present mayor has so far built 75,000 homes. Now, how are you going to be able to build these homes and ensure affordability, especially for low-earning Londoners?
Oh, just to put it in context, housing is without any doubt the #1 issue for London. You could talk to anyone from any political party, they'll tell you the same thing. And that's what's sort of ironic about London, is on the one hand, people see that for 8 years London has prospered and succeeded and boomed under Boris Johnson, but on the other hand, a significant number of people, a really large number, feel that they've been priced out of their own city. And the best example of that is housing. And we've reached a point now where you could earn double an average salary and still not afford to buy a home. And that is a massive, it's a social problem, it's an ethical problem, it's a business problem, it's a real problem for London. So we have no choice, in my view, but to double the number of houses that are being built. That means taking us back to 1930s era levels of development. If you talk to developers or councils who do a lot of development or housing associations and ask them what is the biggest barrier to building homes, it's not finance, there's plenty of finance. It's not planning, that's a political problem. It's land, access to land. So the way I will deliver the 50,000 homes a year is by prizing away from public bodies like NHS and TfL and Ministry of Justice and Ministry of Defence land that is already in the public sector which is not being used, and make it available to develop homes for Londoners.
Okay, but how would we ensure that those homes are affordable, especially for the low-income earners in London?
So there are two answers to that. The first is that when you're building on land that is in public ownership, so mayoral controlled land like TfL, Transport for London, or the GLA, you can be prescriptive. You can say that these homes cannot be sold to people unless they are Londoners. Okay. So one of the problems at the moment is you have all these homes being built, and they're often bought by outside investors, and then they're left empty. And people really resent that, not surprisingly, and it doesn't contribute to the solution. So the first thing is you must have a London first bias. And the second thing is you need to build homes for people across the income spectrum. So if you earn an average London salary today, you're not going to qualify for a social house. So a social house is no more attainable for you than Roman Abramovich's mansion. You can't get either. So you've got to build for people across the spectrum. That means building homes for all levels of the income. That means social homes all the way to subsidy-free and everything in between.
All right. You mentioned housing associations there. From April this year, 2016, they will have to reduce their rent by 1%. For the next 4 years and freeze it. Do you have any plans to assist them? Because that will impact on some of the services that they provide. Anything you can do to assist them?
So I've been talking a lot to the housing associations, and there are two things I want to do with them. Some of them control very old, dilapidated 1950s estates where the conditions are really not great. And what I want to do is to work with those housing associations to regenerate and rebuild those estates. And that causes huge anxiety for people who live there. So the pledge that I have made is that I will, one, only do it if a majority agree. Two, that no one will lose their home. Everyone will be able to return to their home. It'll be a new version, but to their home, and they won't be paying more rent at all. That's my commitment. And I know that's possible because that's what we're doing in my own constituency. We've demonstrated, and by the way, other people have demonstrated it as well. So estates regeneration is really important. But also, the second point, very briefly, if you talk to the housing associations, they want land. You can do a deal with the housing associations. They've got so much capital tied up, ready to be deployed. And if we make the land available to them, they will provide the homes. That's what they want.
The other area is transport. Raising fares for 4 years. What are your plans?
See, I am standing for election. In 4 months' time, I want London to vote for me. And so there's nothing I want more than to say I'm going to cut the cost of travel, or at the very least I'm going to freeze it at 2016 levels, which is what Labour had promised. But I know that that is a promise that either I would break, because you can't keep it, or if I did keep it, it would be catastrophic for London. And the reason for that is that we have a huge surge in our population. We're going to hit 10 million in 10, 15 years' time. If we don't continue to grow the transport network, which is an incredibly expensive thing to do, but if we don't continue to grow the network, people are going to spend more time commuting than they do with their families, and we're not going to unlock the land we need in order to build the homes. You know, if you don't extend the overground to Barking Riverside, you're not going to get the 20,000 homes they promised. If you don't extend the Sutton tram link, you're not going to get the 20,000 homes there. So it's really important that we grow the transport network. That has to be the priority. I am facing huge pressure to make rash and grandiose pledges in relation to fares, but I know that that would be a mistake, and I don't want to make promises that I know I would have to break.
Okay, so would there be a reduction, or would it be maintained?
You would have to set the fares in such a way that you can continue to do what you need to do as a top priority.
Right.
So Boris's increase, well, the increase that we saw in January this year was 1%, and I think that was about right.
Okay. Jobs are an issue, especially for our young graduates. Any plans to ensure that once they graduate, there are availabilities of jobs for them in London? This
is really important. I mean, look, and I'm going to credit Boris Johnson, because in the last 8 years we've seen a record number of jobs in London. We've got 250,000 more businesses now in London than we had before, nearly 1 million now. Every one of those businesses is creating jobs and opportunities, much more effectively than government ever could. So the key is to make sure that London is as business-friendly an environment as possible. And as mayor, I will put most of my emphasis on helping startups, helping entrepreneurs, helping people who want to set up their own business and get going. I think we need to do everything we can to facilitate that through small loans, startup loans, and creating the right infrastructure and environment in which businesses can prosper.
Okay. Now you talk about working within the communities where crime is concerned. Knife and gun crime, huge issue in London. Do you have any plans to engage with the faith leaders, for instance, within the ethnic communities to reduce or to prevent, limit the impact of knife and gun crimes?
Absolutely right, and we have to acknowledge there's been a spike in knife crimes. So 15 people died last year in London, and every single one of those is a human tragedy. So you got to get the knives off the streets, and we discovered that you can still buy 10-inch brutal-looking weapons, even if you're underage, within 24 hours online from places like Amazon. And that's a loophole we need to close, and I've run that campaign, and I'm talking to government about doing just that. But you also need to focus on intervention, on prevention. And there's only so much the police can do, because they're not, in some communities, trusted enough. So that if we want to really engage in prevention, it means drawing inspiration from grassroots organisations throughout the capital who are doing amazing work on tiny budgets. And I've met a lot of these organisations. The most recent one actually was a big organisation. It's QPR Football Club. But they have a project which they're running, which steers kids away from a life of crime. And it's remarkable what they've done on actually a very small budget. That's the kind of stuff we need to roll out throughout the entire capital.
Okay. Now, recently, the government, are proposing £35,000 as the minimum earning of non-EU immigrants. Now, we have shortages of nurses, teachers. These sectors are usually filled by non-EU immigrants. However, also the nursing sector, for instance, average earnings £24,000 per year. What are your thoughts on this proposal?
I'd be very concerned about any policy which makes it harder for us to attract the talent that we need to keep this city successful. We are one of the most diverse cities on earth. We're also the greatest city on earth, and it's not a coincidence, that one follows the other. And I think anyone who doubts that, just imagine stripping away the diversity in London. Imagine what it would then be. It would be a very pale imitation of what it is today. So I wouldn't want to see barriers preventing us from being able to reach out and draw in the most the talent that we need for our NHS, for our businesses, and just to keep London the powerhouse that it is. And that, as mayor, I would always be an ambassador for that vitality that exists in London.
Institutional racism, and a big issue. Now, in the police force, for instance, this has prevented more inclusion or more people from the community becoming police officers. What would you do in that area to reduce that and encourage more participation?
I think it's not just true of police, but I think that we have to acknowledge that recruitment by the Met has improved. So the number of people who are coming forward and signing up to the Met from ethnic minority backgrounds has increased quite a lot. And we need to really accelerate that process. The police, as with other authorities, need to look like the people they're serving. But the same is true of politics, where I come from. We need more politicians from ethnic minority backgrounds. And the same is true, of course, in City Hall. The mayor directly employs and recruits a very large number of people. that institution needs to look like the London that it's serving. So there's a lot we can do around recruitment. I think we're making progress, and I don't want to be critical of what we have today, because we're moving in the right direction, but that's something I think we could be much more bullish about. I also think we could do more to encourage people from BME backgrounds to start their own businesses. I'd like to see a shift in emphasis with our startup loans, for example, towards people from BME backgrounds, with a view to their starting their own businesses and creating jobs and opportunities for others.
Okay, now, this government, there's been a lot of cuts in so many different areas and sectors, affecting, for instance, if we're looking at the health sector, mental health, there is an issue there. If we're looking at the young people within our communities, the availability of recreational facilities are no longer there as they once used to be. What are your thoughts and what do you plan to do to help within those sectors especially?
So there are two answers. I think the government actually has emphasised the problem of mental health more than any previous government. So I think funding for mental health has actually increased quite considerably as an overall share of health funding, and that is a good thing. I think we need to go much further. I mean, take police, who rushed off their feet, massively overstretched, but nearly 40% of the call-outs that they have to respond to relate to mental health.
Yes.
So it's a real concern. So I think we're moving in the right direction, but I think we need to go much further. But the mayor has to make do with what we have. The mayor doesn't set the national budget. The mayor has to deliver a good deal, and that means working with government. So what I would say to Londoners as we approach the election in May is that if you look at my record as an MP over the last 5 years, I've held government to account. I've called them out when they've got it wrong, as they do, but I've delivered a good deal for my constituents. I kept every promise that I made, and as a consequence, when I was voted in a couple of months ago, I got the biggest increased majority of any MP in London. That's what I want to do for London. Hold government to account, be tough with government when they get it wrong, but most importantly, get a good deal for London.
Okay. What would you say, to everybody that's watching? Why is Zac electable?
London depends completely on government. That's a weakness, but it's a fact. So if you want to get stuff done, if you want to build the homes, grow the transport network, protect police budget, clean up our air, create opportunities for young people to improve their own lives, you need someone who's going to get a good deal from government, but who is also strong enough to hold government to account. And again, my record in Parliament, all you can do when you look at a politician, every politician makes promises, is look at their record. And my record bears up to any amount of scrutiny. I've been a good MP, I've delivered my promises, I've kept my word, I've done what I said I would do, and my constituents, the people who know me best, gave me a massive thumbs up at the last election, and that's what I'm hoping will resonate with Londoners in the next few months.
Now, your background is, an issue that some people are quivering with. For you, do you think your background will be a bonus or a minus in this race from
Look, my background is what it is. It's not something that you can change. You can't change history. But I was dealt a good hand in life. There's no doubt about that. But throughout my life, I've been determined to play that hand as well as I possibly can. And I think I have. I've always challenged what I felt was an injustice. I've done that as an MP, but also long before I became an MP, I've always campaigned for the issues that matter to me and to the people I represent. And that has been a thread that has run right the way through my life. So I don't think it's background, and I don't think background matters to people if they believe the person whose background they're talking about. If they don't like the person, then the background matters. If they trust the person, and I hope my record shows that I can be trusted, which is not every politician can say, then I don't see it as an issue.
Okay. Zac, thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Pleasure to see you.
So you've heard what Zac Goldsmith had to say. Are you convinced? Is he your man? Do you think he will be able to stand by his promises? Can he deliver on the issues that are important to you out there? Well, the choice is in your hands. Make sure you get out there and vote. Thank you. Priscilla for Ben TV.